Hello and welcome, stargazers. This is the Outlaw Astrology Cast, and I be your intrepid star guide and cosmic detective, APM. And this is episode 158, and in the Beyond the Golden Dawn series, and where we continue to dismantle inherited dogma, question astrological assignments, and build correspondences that reflect any lived experience, any lived mystical experience, rather than Victorian occult orthodoxy. And so we're going to talk about revisiting the Hanged One, death and temperance through a critical contemporary lens. Examining Golden Dawn assignments, exploring alternatives, and creating personal correspondences that honor sacrifice, transformation, and alchemical integration beyond sanitized spiritual narratives. But first, a little housekeeping. The series assumes a familiarity with Golden Dawn basics. You can find that if you look back a few episodes, you'll find me explaining those basics, and I invite you to become an intellectual outlaw mystic, someone who respects the lineage but refuses stagnation, who thinks dangerously and builds their own sacred architecture. Now, we're hanging out on Instagram. You can find that link in the show notes. There is also a Pinterest page. That link's also in the show notes. There is a free and paid versions of the newsletter called the Daily Stargazer Newsletter and Podcast, which has over 500 archived posts and over 80 newsletter podcasts. It's a private podcast, over 80 episodes available and ongoing with both. And so there's a lot behind the veil, and please join me behind the veil. And these episodes are available for free if you prefer to read and listen, or if you just prefer to read to push in that information a little bit more. And that is it for this week. Also, feel free to like, review, share on wherever you listen to podcasts, but in particular on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And now, moving forward. Okay, so we'll be talking about the Hanged One, death, and temperance. The Hanged One, death, and temperance. Okay, so let's start with the Hanged One. Hanged One equals Neptune. And this is the Golden Dawn assignments, and akin to surrender, spiritual dissolution, sacrifice through letting go, mystical suspension, and transcendence of ego. And by transcendence of ego, we're talking about the Freudian concept of transcendence of ego, meaning the ego in the Freudian concept rather than union, because in the union concept, union depth psychology, one is not trying to overcome the ego. The ego is a necessary part of our psychic architecture that allows us to interface with our conscious and our subconscious and unconscious. And so they would never consider needing to transcend it, simply to help the different parts of you do their jobs far more effectively. Okay, and so that's how the energy plays out. So let's acknowledge that resonance. Neptune is connected to surrender, and here's the problem. I have a problem with the word surrender in that I don't know what people mean when they talk about surrendering. If you mean to say let go, that is a process. The word surrender or let go or release seems to suggest one word for a very long process, or for a much longer process that tends to be more gradual than most people let on. So saying the word surrender tends to represent a process that is uncomfortable, far from easeful, and would tend to be labeled non-spiritual if what you're looking for are Instagram-worthy mystical experiences. And so when we're looking at that, I have a problem with the surrender, but the dissolution, the spiritual sacrifice, that fits that core, Hanged One's core energy, the willingness to release control, to see from a different or inverted perspective, I would say different, and dissolve into something larger. Okay? This card represents the story of, or at least one of the stories of a sacrifice. In some people, if you're Christian, it would be Jesus. And in other If you're from other parts of the world, there will be a story in which a person makes a great sacrifice, like Inanna does in her story on the way to visiting her sister in the underworld. She has to sacrifice her power in order to arrive there, and she does so very vulnerable, which is what her nakedness represents and expresses. So, does this card resonate? So, let's question deeper. Is the Hanged One truly about Neptunian dissolution, or is it about conscious strategic sacrifice, deliberate choice to suspend action, to wait, to endure restriction in the service of a much greater goal? Is this letting go, or is it radical patience? Let's explore some alternatives. So Saturn comes up a lot here. Necessary restriction, time-bound suspension, the patience of enforced waiting. Chiron, the wound that cannot be easily healed, only endured. Integrated, sacrifices healing through suffering. The asteroid Vesta, sacred devotion, willing to sacrifice for a cause, the keeper of the flame. The planet Uranus, the sudden suspension of normal reality, the shock that forces a new perspective. In my case, however, I've chosen the element of air, and here's why. Because this suspended energy is very lovely, but these cards seem to read very passively to me. It's like, oh, you've got the insight. Yay, you, pat on the back. Okay, that's lovely. That's great. Thank you. And what am I supposed to do with this insight? This insight just lives in my head and oodles about my brain like a penny being, shoved down a hill, or a pebble being put into a pond, or, that just doesn't feel right to me. It just feels like the start of something that just abruptly closes out. Okay, I hung upside down. I have a new perspective. Woohoo, yay me. I've let something go. Woohoo, yay me. I've been patient and I waited, which is similar to Lagus in runes. It's that, or ice, or Isa, which is, delayed, standing still, stagnation, non-movement, stillness, which will be seen as stagnation, which is a shadow side of this card. And so in my case, I looked at it and I thought, this card needs a little bit more thinking. Piscean, Neptunian energy is not thinky energy, it's non-linear energy, it's intuitive energy, and that intuition needs some sort of component that organizes it. Because if you can organize it into a framework, there's a potential to integrate the information and thereby make it embodied wisdom. And what is embodied wisdom? It is wisdom that you live. You know this is a truth for you because you lived it and it was reinforced by your lived experience. Information that just toodles about in your head with no lived experience is information that just toodles about in your head. Nice to have, but not entirely useful. We want it to be useful, don't we? So that's why I've chosen the element of air, because I need to be able to step back. I need to be able to, okay, nice insight, I need to step back. Is this useful? Can I use this? Can I use this slowly and deliberately? Do I have any lived experience that backs this up? Does this resonate? You see, those are all mental questions, hence my choice of the element of air. Now, we're going to complicate this narrative, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to ask these questions. What if the Hanged One represents not passive surrender, but active endurance? What if this card is about the revolutionary who accepts imprisonment, knowing it will galvanize a movement? Say, for example, like Nelson Mandela. Or the artist who sacrifices comfort for vision. Louise Carrington. There is quite a few others that I've just read about, but any artist will make sacrifices. Willem de Kooning had to make sacrifices during the World War II and after, because paint, canvases, things of that nature were not being produced plentifully, and so he had to resort to newspaper, telephone, whatever he could paint on, and that is making a sacrifice in service to his art. the mystic who chooses solitude over belonging. The story of Gautama Buddha, who left behind all the trappings of royalty and wealth to go out to gain enlightenment. Okay, so those are some of the narratives you might associate with this card. Let's encourage a little personal exploration. When have you experienced true suspension? Was it Neptunian, as in dissolving, surrendering, mystical, or was it Saturnine, enduring, restricted, patient? Was it Chironic, wounded but transformed through it? Or Vesta touched, sacrificing for sacred purpose? What correspondence honors your lived experience of sacrifice and perspective shift? Because that's the one that's going to resonate the most. Just picking something because other people have picked it or because other people say it's right doesn't always make it the right choice. And let's move on to the death card. So death equals Scorpio, or the annihilation of that births the new. So let's review the Golden Dawn assignment, which is death equals Scorpio, as in transformation, regeneration, death and rebirth, shadow work, the Phoenix cycle. Ooh, the Phoenix cycle. Yum, yum, yum. Okay, let's acknowledge the fit. Scorpio's association with death, transformation and regeneration is perhaps the most widely accepted correspondence in tarot. It captures the intensity, the inevitability, the transformative power of endings. But we're going to question the narrative of rebirth because, we can, because I said so, because I wanna, etc. And so, let's look. Now, we could do Pluto, which is still pretty close in my opinion. It's the same bloody thing. It's death as power, transformation as compulsion, the underworld journey, dismantling of ego and identity. Okay, so I don't want to dismantle my ego or my identity. I want to shift them. I want to shift perspective. Dismantling suggests that my ego and my identity are tower cards that are about to come apart when what I need is a shift in perspective. So I can see Pluto, but for me, Pluto is close to being Scorpio in my opinion. Now, we could use Saturn as well, death as time's inevitability, endings as natural consequence, mortality as teacher. That could work too. We could use the asteroid Persephone, which is even juicier in my opinion. Death as abduction, or abdication if you like. Transformation is non-consensual initiation. The descent into the underworld. Non-consensual initiation can be any experience that you did not agree to. Like poverty is an underworld experience. Mental health issues. Relationship issues. Mental health issues. Poverty, etc. are non-consensual initiations, meaning you didn't ask. It just happened and now you have to deal with it. And those are all opportunities to send initiations, unwanted or otherwise, into the underworld, which is Pluto energy. A bit close, but asteroid Persephone could work here. We could also use the fixed star Algol, which is death as confrontation with shadow, Medusa energy, the head that must be severed. I instead chose Taurus because that energy there is slow, it's deliberate, it's sustainable, but the problem is that things that you've built carefully, studiously, are also subject to change, subject to transformation, subject to death. And Taurus energy is well known and well memed into not liking comfort, not liking change. I would say that Taurus energy likes change just fine so long as it's on its own terms, because they can be stubborn that way. I want it my way is the way I would see that. So Taurus energy is a reckoning with comfort, pleasure. All good things must eventually come to an end. The same way all awful things must also come to an end. And so I see it as that Taurus reckoning that no matter how wonderful an experience, no matter how pleasurable, how comforting, how easeful, how slowly, deliberately, gradually, sustainably we've built something, it will still eventually go through a process of death, transformation, rebirth, regeneration, etc. And hence my choice. And since Venus is the planetary ruler, with quotes, of Taurus, it also means that our Venus energy, meaning how we harmonize with others or don't, what our values are also subject to change. All things die, including concepts, including things that are abstractions, also die. And so, hence the choice. Now, is this set in stone? No, it's not. I can just as easily tomorrow wake up and go, that worked, and now it doesn't, because I am an ongoing, emerging, becoming human being, and it's going to change, because also I have a lot of mutability in my chart. Let's discuss the cultural dimension. And Western Tarot often sanitizes death as change or transformation. But what if we need and we read death as literal, political, ecological? What if death represents the end of systems, species, ways of life? Which correspondence supports your willingness to face finality without spiritual bypass, which is why Taurus. Why? Because systems die, species die, ways of life die, and sometimes they die forever, they don't come back, or they come back in a completely different form that we're not going to recognize because the people who remembered that it was that way once are no longer with us or are for some reason silent. And so that's why I give it to Taurus energy. Now, it's sanitized to change or transformation because human beings have a hard time dealing with the fact, because it's a tension we all have to deal with as part of the anxiety that we feel, that death is never that far away. It's always walking in tandem with us. Slightly, it's in the shadow, we're walking in the sun. You're never far from the awareness that one day you too will end. This version of you will end. And whether or not you believe in the afterlife or reincarnation or not, this incarnation will be over one day, and so too will the thoughts, the things that made you will cease one day. And that can be very uncomfortable, hence the desire to turn death into change, to transformation, to make it more palatable to deal with, to cope with every day of life, because you cannot have it front of mind all the time. Now, let's experiment a little bit. Let's try working with death as maybe Pluto or Saturn or Uranus or even Persephone or Algol. Does it deepen your readings around grief, loss, the terror of true endings? Does it make you feel more honest about what cannot be saved, only mourned and released? Because sometimes the ending is a real ending. The relationship that's over and you're like, oh, they might come back. The friend that passes, which by the way has just recently happened to me, and my brain is having a hard time accepting that fact. I still expect someone to say, we were just joking, oh, ha, I've been, over here doing this thing, it was a mistake. That's what's happening in my mind. I'm having a hard time accepting it, and so that's very present death energy. My comfort zone has been slashed to understand that this dear friend is not going to come back. This dear friend is gone from this life, and what I have of them are the memories, and those memories sometimes make it sweet that they were here, but it also makes it painful because it reminds me that they're not. And that is an inescapable part of the death card. And now onward, let's look into temperance. Now, I am going to say this because I have a bias about this card. When I hear it described, I think it's the most boring card. It is one of the most boring cards. And by the way, if we use numerology, number 14 is supposed to be my card. And I look at this card and I go, blech. No. And I don't like at all that Golden Dawn has said, wow, this is definitely Sagittarian energy. I'm like, where the bloody hell are you getting that? So, I'm just going to let you know that's a bias right here. So you can, when you hear it in my voice, if you hear it in my voice, you'll know why. So, temperance equals Sagittarius, or the alchemical integration of opposites. That reads more Gemini to me, but let's start from the top. Let's review the Golden Dawn assignment, which is this. Temperance equals Sagittarius, as in philosophical balance. Optimistic moderation, the arrow that finds its target through measured aim, expansive wisdom through temperate practice. Wow, everything about that entire list of words just made me, I nearly fell asleep reading it. All right, let's acknowledge the partial fit. Okay, Sagittarius' connection to philosophy, to higher meaning, to the quest for truth, can align with Temperance's search for tempering and integration. The idea that wisdom comes through synthesizing opposites. Okay, let's just jump to the question optimism part, because that whole partial fit thing didn't work for me at all. So let's just jump on in. Let's question that optimism. Is temperance truly about Sagittarians' expansive, optimistic, forward-moving energy, or is it about the slow, painstaking, repetitive work of alchemy, the daily practice of integration, the grinding labor of balancing inner opposites, the discipline of not flying off in pursuit of the next adventure? Let's explore alternatives, shall we? So, could be Venus, harmony through relationship, beauty through balance, the artist who blends opposing colors. Could be Libra. Actually, I agree with both Venus and Libra, but mostly Libra. The scales, the weighing, the constant adjustment towards equilibrium. Scales, by the way, are usually in movement. They don't stay still often, and if they do, it's temporary. Just assume it's temporary. We could use asteroid Pallas Athene for this as well. That's strategic wisdom, the weaving of opposites into a coherent pattern. We could use Chiron, healing through the integration of wound and gift. We could use Mercury, the alchemical messenger, the one who moves between worlds and synthesis and opposing realms. I would also include Vesta, because that requires a devotion to something, to give it that commitment, to be able to go through that process. I would suggest Saturn, because Saturn can sit and be patient long enough to do this. Let's see, is there any others I would like to suggest? Now, I think that those are all of my choices currently, and all the alternatives I think worth exploring. Now, my own is Gemini. And the reason why Gemini, because Gemini is definitely about duality. It's about having, that's why it's the twins. It's having two faces, just say that. Two sides of the self that require working with, integrating. And integrating doesn't mean one side obliterates the other side. It's that they find a way, an interface that allows the two sides to work together, so that you don't lose the energy, because each side has a purpose. It has strengths and it has weaknesses. Even if it's the shadow part, the part in darkness, or complete darkness or shadow, it still has wisdom to share. And if it's all light, all that stuff, just because it's in light doesn't mean it's better. It just means that it's valued more because of, for many different reasons. Okay, so we don't want to ever think that we want the opposites to obliterate each other. We don't. We want to be able to hold the paradox of the two, which is Gemini energy, and hold that tension, which is an internal friction, which usually gets things going. Consider the sun. When it has hydrogen, how it gets there? It has particles heating up. The more they heat up, the more of them start to live. The more of them that multiply, the more there's heat. The more heat, the more particles. The more particles, the more heat. And now we got fusion. Nuclear fusion, which gets us the sun, which gets us all this warmth and light, which keeps our planet from being a cold, blue, icy stone in space, or completely not there. Okay? So there's that. So that is very Gemini energy. It is two-pointed. much like the two stars, Castor and Pollux, which are the twin stars of the constellation Gemini, hence the twins. And one was of divine origin, the other mortal origin. They came out of one egg in one lineage telling of the story, and in two separate eggs in another telling of the story. But it's opposites, the divine part of us and the more mortal human part of us. And the two must learn to work together and be multi-pointed. There's us and other. There's me and them. There's this and that. There's here and there. You understand? That's Gemini energy, and it's the alchemical marriage of these opposites and this black and white thinking that can integrate into something greater. So let's discuss the alchemical dimension here. And that is temperance is the alchemical card par excellence. It's about the union of opposites, which harkens back to, because this is the angel's on this card, so it harkens back to the Lover's card, which also is about opposites, and it also triangulates with the Chariot card, which is also an integration of two opposites. Okay, and so that's what we mean by alchemical card par excellence. It's a fusion union of opposites, a slow work of integration. The patience required to blend fire and water, like when you're blowing glass or when you're tempering steel to make a beautiful sword, for example, or a knife, etc. So without extinguishing or evaporating either. Too much fire and you will split, you will break the glass, or it won't form properly. Or if it's steel, it'll get cracks in it. And if the cracks are severe enough, you're going to have to start over again. Now, if too much heat, you won't get what you need. It'll split. Too much water and you get fissures. And those fissures can be a problem when you're creating a knife or a sword, in that it will make it so that the weapon will be structurally unsound and therefore dangerous to use. And so you have to keep fire and water. And that basically harkens to the minor arcana. You've got to keep the fire energy and the water energy in harmony. One can never overtake the other, because when that happens, if it happens, it is usually disastrous. So you need the patience and the skill to be able to sit with that process to integrate. So the question here is, which correspondence captures this painstaking sacred labor for you? Use your lived experience to grok that, to sort that out. Now, inquiry. Here's some questions that you can play with. When have you experienced true integration? Was it Sagittarian, as in philosophical, expansive, and vision-driven? Was it Venusian, relational, aesthetic, harmonious? Was it mercurial, intellectual, communicative, and mediating? Was it Chironic, healing through accepted paradox? Was it Saturnine, patience, endurance, focus? For example, so let your lived experience guide your correspondences, okay? If what I say sounds good and you want to use mine, that's lovely. But if that doesn't rock you, then choose your own. Alrighty, so let's create our own correspondences. Here's the practical method that I am choosing to use, still exploring it. It is going to change, obviously. So, step one, you sit with the card. That could be through meditation, journaling, daily pulls, or simply putting it on your altar, and then you can notice the planet, the sign, the element, the archetype, and see what keeps appearing in synchronicities and in your intuition, which includes dreams, feelings that are non-linear knowing is what I'm speaking of. Very high priestessy type energy. So, step two. You want to research alternatives. So you can look behind the Golden Dawn. You can look at Marseille, the Tote system. You can look into modern psychological tarot. You can use astrology, fixed stars. You could use points like Black Moon Lilith, the lunar nodes. You can also use the nodes of planets. All planets have nodes. The sun is not a planet, so it doesn't have nodes per se, but the moon has nodes. Mercury on out, they all have nodes. You can play with those. You can find software that will give you those nodes anytime you like. And you want to see what resonates. You want to also look into evolutionary astrology, political and liberation-focused readings, religion, philosophy, etc., art even, etc. Step 3, test in practice. So you want to experiment, and you want to do it for about 1 to 3 lunar cycles. You want to make certain see if it clarifies things, deepens the interpretation, if it clarifies timing, it feels more alive than the traditional assignment. Step 4, you want to document your system. That means you write it down in personal correspondences. You want to put down your reasoning, you want to put down your lived experience, and this becomes your grimoire, your living tarot astrology codex. Step 5, you want to share and discuss. That means you bring it to any study groups, online communities, or trusted fellow practitioners. Safety first. If for some reason you're about to share and you suddenly get the urge, you're like, this doesn't feel like the right time, or doesn't feel like the right correspondence yet, honor that. So if there's a party like, I just don't feel like sharing, or I just want to share with these people about this just yet, or I just don't want to share, period, for now, honor that. We're honoring our intuition, and the best way to do that is when you get a full-on visceral reaction, to honor that reaction in the moment. You're committing in the moment to listen to your intuition. This is how that gets stronger, and you're able to trust it more. It is a practice, not a destination. It is a process, not an absolute. Okay? And so, this process is intellectual discourse, and that discourse will sharpen the intuition and also reveal blind spots, because blind spots are part of being human. Step 6, return to the tradition with fresh eyes. So after you experiment with alternatives, you can revisit the Golden Dawn assignment, and you'll notice that sometimes rebellion will clarify what was valuable in the original, and sometimes it'll confirm the need to diverge permanently. Let whatever happens be okay in the moment. See, you don't have to commit in perpetuity for all time. You're only making a commitment for the moment, because chaos mages commit for the moment. The moment is all you have. That's what you commit to. This is very magus energy, or magician energy, or mage energy. Okay? And so, here's what I want, to pound in, to nail down. This is not about discarding tradition. It's about engaging with it critically, respectfully, and courageously, because the best occultists are always heretics, and rebellion is a sacred act when done with intention and integrity, which we are always doing. Now, lastly, here's the key takeaway here. The Hanged One and Death and Temperance carry potent energies. They may or may not be fully captured by Neptune, by Scorpio, by Sagittarius. So your tarot practice, as does mine, tends to deepen when you dare to question, to experiment, to build correspondences from embodied wisdom, meaning wisdom that comes from your observations, your feelings, your values, your ethics, and your lived experience. So that lived experience of sacrifice, transformation, and alchemical integration that refuses spiritual bypass is what we're looking at here, okay? And so, choose one of the 3 cards, the Hanged One, Death, Temperance, and spend this week working with an alternative correspondence, and notice what shifts in your readings. What shifts in your relationships to sacrifice, to endings, to integration? What shifts in your connection to the card's living intelligence? Okay, and next episode is episode 159, and that'll be the Devil, the Tower, and the Star, reclaiming shadow, destruction, and hope through contemporary astrological correspondences that honor complexity, liberation, and radical honesty. And one last thing, once again, there is a Daily Stargazer podcast and newsletter, free and paid versions. Newer full moon is when I usually post on there, but these readings, this topic will be there for free in case you'd rather read and listen, or just read to complement the listening, okay? and we can be found on Instagram, Pinterest, and the podcast. Like and subscribe and share, and that is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. So thank you very much for listening, stargazers, and until next time, keep your feet on the ground and your eyes to the stars. Peace and astro magic.